Welcome, everyone. Ready to go deep on the psychology of money.
Always ready for that.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. We're diving into Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money, today.
Oh, fantastic choice.
Yeah, and, we always talk about, stock tips and budgeting tricks on this show.
Right, the more technical stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But this is going to be a bit different, right?
Absolutely. This is about the why the psychology.
The psychology, yeah, like what is actually driving our financial decisions, What are those hidden forces at play?
Right, the often subconscious beliefs we have about money that we don't even realize are shaping our choices.
Exactly. And one of the biggest things Housel dives into is the power of time, and he uses Warren Buffett as a prime example.
Oh yeah, Buffett, the classic example of long-term investing.
Right, but get this. Did you know that the vast majority of his wealth, we're talking $81.5 billion, was actually accumulated after he qualified for Social Security?
It's mind-blowing, right? It
Yeah.
really highlights how compounding works its magic over time.
It's not about getting rich quick, it's about consistency.
Exactly. It's about staying in the game for the long haul.
He even compares Buffett to Jim Simons, who had much higher average annual returns but ended up far less wealthy.
Right, because Simon's investing journey was much shorter.
Exactly. So it really challenges that, whole get rich quick mentality that so many of us fall prey to.
Definitely. And I think that's one of the most important takeaways from the book.
Yeah, for sure. And what's fascinating is how Housel connects this idea of time to luck and risk.
Yes. He argues that we tend to oversimplify both success and failure.
Yeah, we always hear those stories about, self-made millionaires.
Right. We assume they just worked harder or were smarter than everyone else.
But Housel challenges that narrative.
He uses Bill Gates as an example.
Oh, yeah, Bill Gates.
I mean, obviously, Gates is brilliant.
Right, no one's denying that.
But he also happened to attend one of the only high schoolers in the world at that time that had a computer terminal.
And I never thought about that.
It was called Lakeside School, and it's really hard to imagine Microsoft even existing if he hadn't had that early exposure.
It makes you wonder how many other brilliant minds are out there who just didn't have those same lucky breaks.
Exactly. And then there's the flip side. We often beat ourselves up over our financial mistakes.
Right, we see them as purely bad decisions.
But as Housel points out, sometimes they were calculated risks that just didn't pan out.
It's like that saying, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Exactly. And he uses these contrasting stories of Jesse Livermore and Abraham Jermansky.
Oh, remind me who those are again.
So Livermore made a fortune during the 1929 crash, but later lost everything. And Jermansky was ruined by that same crash.
So one made a killing and the other was totally wiped out by the same event.
Exactly. And it just shows how unpredictable the markets can be.
Yeah, even the most skilled investors can get caught off guard.
It's a humbling reminder that luck and risk play a bigger role than we often acknowledge.
Definitely, it's a good reminder to be a bit more forgiving of ourselves when things don't go as planned.
Absolutely. We're all human after all.
So, okay, if luck and risk are so important, how do we actually navigate this whole financial landscape?
Well, Housel emphasizes this concept of margin of safety.
Margin of safety.
Yeah, it's like having a financial cushion to withstand those unexpected events.
Oh, so kind of like an emergency fund.
Exactly. And he uses this great analogy of card counting in blackjack.
Oh, I love a good analogy.
So even the most skilled card counters never bet everything they have.
Because there's always a chance they could be wrong.
Precisely. They always leave room for error.
Makes sense. It's about managing that downside risk.
Exactly. And he points out how Bill Gates always kept enough cash on hand to cover a year's worth of payroll at Microsoft.
Even if they had zero revenue coming in.
Exactly. It was about building in that margin of safety.
It's a powerful example. And what I thought was really interesting is how Housel connects this idea of margin of safety to the idea that the economy is largely driven by narratives.
Yeah, by the stories we tell ourselves about how things work.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, like he paints this picture of an alien visiting Earth in 2007 and then again in 2009.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
So all the tangible assets are still there in 2009. Right.
Like the buildings, the infrastructure.
Yeah, all of it, but the economy has completely collapsed.
And why is that?
Because the narrative changed.
Ah, I get it. So in 2007, we believed in the stability of housing prices and the financial system.
Exactly. But by 2009, that story had completely unraveled.
And that shift in narrative led to a domino effect.
Exactly. Mortgage defaults skyrocketed, banks went under, businesses failed, unemployment soared.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Right. And Housel argues that these narratives, even though they're intangible, they're incredibly powerful.
They shape our beliefs, and ultimately our actions,
And he uses examples like the dot-com bubble
where people were willing to pay ridiculous prices for companies with no earnings.
because they were so caught up in the story of the internet changing everything.
Exactly. And we saw a similar dynamic in the housing bubble leading up to 2008.
It's like we get swept up in these collective delusions
It's a reminder to always question the prevailing
and
narratives.
make sure our own beliefs are based on facts and evidence rather than just fear or greed.
Wise words to live by.
Now let's shift gears a bit. Housel also introduces this concept of the happiness dividend.
The happiness dividend. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's the idea that money's greatest intrinsic value isn't about material possessions.
Okay, so it's not about buying a fancy car or a big house.
Not necessarily. It's about the control it gives you over your time and your options.
Ah, so it's about freedom.
Exactly. Freedom to choose how you spend your time, freedom to pursue your passions, freedom to be with the people you love.
Freedom to design a life that truly aligns with your values.
That's it. And this really resonated with me because, when I was younger, I was like determined to go into investment banking.
Oh yeah, the classic high-paying but demanding career path.
Right. And I thought like making a lot of money was the key to happiness. And I actually landed this summer internship at a big investment bank in Los Angeles.
Okay, wow. So you were living the dream, right?
Well, it was eye-opening to say the least.
Oh, in what way?
I quickly realized that the price of that high salary was an insane workload.
Ah, the long hours.
Yeah.
The constant pressure.
Exactly. I was constantly stressed, always on call, and I felt like I had zero control over my own time.
It sounds exhausting.
It was honestly one of the worst experiences of my life.
So it was a good lesson learned, I guess.
It was definitely a reality check.
And it highlights this common trap, right?
Yeah, we trade our time for money, but then we don't have the time to actually enjoy the things that money can buy.
It's a vicious cycle.
And that's why Housel stresses the importance of using your money, even small amounts, to buy back your time.
Buy back your time.
Yeah, can you work a little less? Can you outsource some tasks? Can you invest in experiences that bring you joy?
It's about recognizing that true wealth isn't just about your net worth.
It's about having the flexibility to live a life that is meaningful to you.
Absolutely. It's about aligning your spending with your values.
And that brings us to another crucial topic, saving.
Ah, the S word.
Right, but Housel has this brilliant line. He says, saving is the gap between your ego and your income.
Wow, that's really insightful.
It is right. He's essentially saying that people who are truly good with money often don't care what others think about their spending habits.
They're not trying to impress anyone with a fancy car or designer clothes.
They understand that true wealth is often invisible.
It's about having that financial security to make choices that align with your values.
Regardless of what society might dictate.
Exactly. It's about being financially independent.
It reminds me of that story Housel tells about Rihanna.
Rihanna the singer.
Yeah, she almost went bankrupt because she was spending so lavishly.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and her financial advisor's response was classic. He said, was it really necessary to tell her that if you spend money on things, you will end up with the things and not the money?
It's so simple, yet so profound.
It is, right? And we often fall into that trap.
We spend money to signal wealth or status.
But the most financially secure people are often the ones who live well below their means,
They're the ones who are quietly building wealth.
creating that solid foundation for their future.
So the challenge for all of us is to resist that urge to impress others.
And instead focus on building wealth, steadily aligning our financial lives with our values.
It's about playing the long game.
And on that note, I think we're going to take a quick pause here.
Sounds good. We'll be back in a bit with more insights from the psychology of money.
Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how, saving more comes down to the difference between your ego and your income.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in that comparison game,
Oh, absolutely. Especially in today's social media-driven world.
Right, it's like everyone's trying to project this image of success and wealth.
But Housel reminds us that, true financial security is about so much more than keeping up with the Joneses.
It's about aligning your spending with your values, right?
Exactly. And, this applies to our careers as well.
How so?
Well, we might chase a high-paying job for the status it brings, even if it makes us miserable.
Oh, I totally get that. It's like the golden handcuff syndrome.
Exactly. He tells this story about a friend who, achieved his lifelong dream of becoming a doctor
Wow.
and ended up hating it.
Hating being a doctor.
Yeah, he hated the long hours, the intense pressure, the constant feeling of being on call.
That's tough. It's a reminder that chasing financial success at the expense of our well-being might not actually lead to happiness.
Right. It's about finding that balance.
And, speaking of long-term goals, Housel also talks about this concept of the end of history illusion.
The end of history illusion, what's that?
It's this idea that we believe we've become our final selves. Like our values are set in stone.
Oh, I see. So we assume that what we want today is what we'll want 10 or 20 years from now.
Exactly. But that's rarely the case, right?
Definitely. Our goals and priorities change over time.
So how do we avoid making decisions that our future selves will regret?
Well, Housel suggests cultivating what he calls a barbelled personality.
A barbelled personality, what does that even mean?
It means being optimistic about the future.
So like having big dreams?
Exactly. But also acknowledging the possibility of things going wrong.
So like having a backup plan.
Precisely. It's about finding that balance between hope and prudence.
So we shouldn't be afraid to dream big, but we also need to be prepared for those dreams to maybe not unfold exactly as we imagined.
Right. And this ties back into that idea of leaving room for error in our financial plans.
Kind of like that margin of safety we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Life is full of surprises.
And our finances should be flexible enough to adapt.
And, perhaps most importantly, we should be open to changing our minds.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, it's easy to get stuck in our ways.
But if a career path or a financial goal no longer serves us, we shouldn't be afraid to abandon it.
He has this great quote. He says, "Embracing the idea that financial goals made when you were a different person should be abandoned without mercy."
Versus put on life support and dragged on.
It's a powerful reminder that growth often involves letting go.
Absolutely. And this ties into another interesting point that Housel makes.
What's that?
He argues that, rather than striving for cold rationality in our financial decisions.
Like trying to be like Spock from Star Trek.
Exactly. He says we should aim to be pretty reasonable.
Pretty reasonable.
Yeah, it's an acknowledgement that, emotions play a significant role in how we handle money.
Oh, for sure. Like we're not robots.
Exactly. He even uses the example of Harry Markowitz.
Remind me who he is again.
He won a Nobel Prize for developing this mathematically optimal investment strategy.
Okay, so he's like a genius when it comes to investing.
Yeah, but guess what? He doesn't even follow his own model when managing his personal finances.
Really? Why not?
Because it's too complex and stressful for him.
So what does he do instead?
He just splits his money evenly between stocks and bonds.
That's it.
Yep. It's a much simpler approach.
And it brings him peace of mind.
Exactly. And Housel argues that while, taking calculated risks can be rewarding over time.
Right, like investing in the stock market, for example.
We should be wary of what he calls ruinous risk.
Ruinous risk? What's that?
It's the kind of risk that could wipe you out completely.
Oh, okay, so like putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Or investing in something you don't understand.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between being reckless and being overly cautious.
He uses this analogy of a steam engine.
Okay, I'm listening.
So too much pressure leads to an explosion.
But too little pressure and it won't move at all.
Right. We need that optimal level of risk.
To make progress without blowing ourselves up.
Exactly. And this applies to all areas of life, not just finances.
It's about understanding the game you're playing.
And making sure your actions align with your goals.
He also warns against blindly following the crowd.
Oh, yeah. That's a classic mistake.
It's like during the dot-com bubble.
Where everyone was chasing the next hot stock.
And ignoring traditional valuation metrics.
They weren't in it for the long haul.
And when the bubble burst, it was the long-term investors who were left holding the bag.
It's a reminder that you need to define your own investment strategy.
Your own time horizon and your own risk tolerance.
Don't just blindly follow what everyone else is doing.
It's about thinking for yourself.
And being aware of how susceptible we are to herd mentality.
Housel encourages us to cultivate a healthy skepticism,
Always question the prevailing narrative.
and be open to changing our minds as new information emerges.
He acknowledges that the financial world is messy.
Yeah, there's no one right answer.
He says smart, informed, and reasonable people can disagree in finance.
Because there's so much we don't know.
And the systems are so complex.
It's humbling to realize that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to personal finance.
What works for one person might not work for another.
Because our circumstances, our goals, our risk tolerance, even our personalities are all unique.
And that's what makes The Psychology of Money such a valuable read.
It doesn't give you a prescriptive formula for success.
But it helps you understand your own unique relationship with money.
It encourages introspection, self-awareness, and a recognition of our own biases.
Our strengths and weaknesses.
So we can craft a financial plan that truly aligns with who we are.
And, Housel advocates for embracing a simpler, more conservative approach if that's what brings peace of mind.
He shares his own investment strategy, which is basically just investing in index funds for the long term.
And prioritizing paying off his mortgage.
Even though these might not be the most financially optimal decisions on paper,
They align with his values.
and they provide a sense of security and freedom.
He's prioritizing being psychologically reasonable over chasing the highest returns.
And that brings us to another important point. Personal finance is a journey, not a destination.
There will be moments of doubt, unexpected challenges, and even some losses along the way.
But understanding the psychology of money can help us navigate those challenges.
With greater resilience and clarity.
What resonates most with you from the psychology of money?
The idea that we should design our financial lives around what truly matters to us,
It's about aligning our finances with our values.
so we can achieve a deeper sense of fulfillment and freedom.
It's a powerful message that goes beyond simply accumulating wealth.
It's about creating a life that feels both prosperous and meaningful.
We'll pause here for a moment to let that sink in. So we're back talking all things Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, and before the break we were talking about this idea of, aligning your finances with what really matters to you.
It's not just about, maximizing your returns or, min-maxing every financial decision. It's about creating a life that feels good.
Exactly. And I thought it was really interesting how Housel brought up, doctors.
Oh, yeah. What about them?
He was saying how, they often choose less aggressive treatments for themselves than
Okay.
they would for their patients.
Huh? Why is that?
Because, they understand the limits of medicine.
Right. It's not always a clear-cut solution.
And they're prioritizing a different approach when it comes to, their own well-being.
So it's not always about, going for the most aggressive treatment,
Yeah.
even if it might offer the best chance of survival.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between risk and reward.
And Housel suggests we apply that same logic to our own, financial decisions.
It's a good reminder that personal finance isn't just about, crunching numbers and optimizing returns.
It's about understanding ourselves, our own psychology.
And making choices that align with our, individual needs and values.
It's not one size fits all.
Definitely. And he emphasizes the importance of minimizing regret.
Oh, yeah, like that feeling of, if only I had done this or that.
It's not about finding the, perfect financial strategy.
It's about finding one that allows you to sleep well at night,
Knowing that you've made, thoughtful choices.
aligned with your goals.
Exactly. And Housel is really transparent about his own, investment strategy.
Yeah, what does he do?
Him and his wife, they just invest in index funds for the long term.
Okay, makes sense.
And they've chosen to pay off their mortgage.
Nothing wrong with that.
Even though, those might not be the most financially optimal decisions on paper.
It's about what feels right for them.
Exactly. They prioritize that sense of security and independence.
Over potential gains from, leveraging their assets.
Which is totally valid. It's their money.
Exactly. It highlights that idea of being, psychologically reasonable.
As opposed to blindly following what might seem like the most rational advice.
Right. Sometimes the simplest approach is the best.
Especially when it comes to something as emotionally charged as money.
Absolutely. And, Housel reminds us that personal finance is a journey, not a destination.
There will be bumps along the road for sure.
There will be ups and downs, unexpected challenges, moments of doubt.
But by understanding, the psychology at play.
We can navigate those challenges with more confidence.
In resilience.
It's about recognizing that we're all human.
We're not perfect.
We're prone to biases and emotional reactions.
And the psychology of money encourages us to embrace those imperfections.
And make peace with the fact that there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
It's been a great conversation so far, exploring this idea that our relationship with money is so personal.
Yeah, it's not just about logic and numbers.
There's a whole psychological layer to it.
Absolutely. So, any final thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah, I think Housel's most impactful message is this: take the time to define what truly matters to you in life.
And then consciously design your financial life around those values.
That's powerful.
That's the real key to mastering the psychology of money.
It's not about, becoming a millionaire or retiring early.
It's about creating a life that feels both prosperous and meaningful.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the psychology of money.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.